Hi there, welcome to Sharing Global Views by Glaze, a show where we hear international experts' thoughts, ideas, and insights across various industries. Over the past year and a half since this show was initiated, we are very grateful to have seen many speakers join us and share their perspectives on increasing cooperation, promoting sustainable development, and making the world a better place. Every conversation inspires, and today's show, the last episode of 2021, is no exception. So we'll have more.
Hello, Helena. Thank you for introducing this last session for us for this year. One long-term goal for Glaze is to help small media enterprises with sharing economy business. Success experience are very valuable to us, but experience that on the path to success is equally valuable, if not more. Most of the entrepreneurs interviewed by our speaker today work on projects that are very relevant and supportive to their local community and are very down-to-earth projects. It may not so spectacular yet, but we have seen comments from many different countries under his YouTube channel mentioned that the experience shared on the channel helped them a lot. When the platform in Asia support entrepreneurs, which is not that mature kind of a platform in Asia, those kind of program and community really help a lot. So welcome everyone for the Americas having their morning tea and European friends having your lunch tea and all the Asian friends probably having your dinner tea. So welcome you to come another episode. So before I introduce too much more, please allow me to introduce our main host of the day, who can explain a lot more about our Glaze and our key speaker of the day. Welcome President Jose Maria Figueres, who is also the standing chairman of the Glaze.
T and Elena, thank you so much. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Sharing Global Views. This conversation is brought to you by Glaze, the Global Alliance of the Sharing Economy. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization which seeks to promote the ethos, the values of the sharing economy, and also to highlight people who are at the cutting edge of this fantastic movement, which in a planet with limited resources and a growing population is the way forward as we share more of everything that we do, we value, we work for, and we cherish. Today, I'm very honored here to be able to introduce a fantastic speaker, Richard Brubaker, who is a managing director of Collective Responsibility and the founder of Hands-On China. Richard is going to be talking to us about social entrepreneurship and innovation in Asia and lessons in how we take that to scale, because scale is relevant to impact. And in everything we do, we want to have impact. History shows us that after we have gone through great endeavors as humanity, we have always been able to come out of crisis and fast forward development. And today, coming out of this global crisis, social entrepreneurship and innovation particularly play a pivotal role in us being able to fast forward and fulfill the aspirations of well-being that so many people have around the world. Richard is the managing director of Collective Responsibility, and he is also the founder of Hands-On China. He is also an adjunct professor of sustainability and social innovation at Southern Methodist University. He is driven by the belief that change begins with every small single step we take. And he has therefore spent the last 20 years in Asia working to engage, inspire, and equip those around him to take their first steps and make a difference in the world, acting as a catalyst to drive sustainability, to bring about changes in leadership and business models, and to recalibrate old models so that new opportunities can be captured. Richard has centered his work around building foundations of knowledge, understanding core issues, engaging stakeholders, which is so important, and doing whatever it takes to move this agenda forward. Well, Richard has overseen the development and execution of more than 200 projects aiming to address social, environmental, and economic challenges faced by Asia. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation with respect to social entrepreneurship and innovation in Asia. Please take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's a great honor to be here and to be engaging with yourself. Obviously, I mean, I've been a big fan of the work that you guys have done there, and you know, the community at large that you're building here. So, I mean, where to start? So, yeah, I've been in Asia for the better part of the last 20 years. Actually, about 25 years ago, I flew to Japan for a year of study abroad, fell in love with the region, came back to China. I'm 1 month short of my 20th anniversary actually in China, so quite a while. And honestly, like what I've seen is just, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, if you're looking at my backdrop here, only that tower with the ball right there was pretty much one of the only buildings on that side of the river when I first got here, and everything's really developed since then. And you know, economic development, the economy, you know, wealth generation has all happened. And of course, as part of that, the negative externalities, I think that many governments, nonprofits, and businesses are now starting to really worry about have started to come to scale. And as they do, you know, my first job was kind of helping a lot of companies trying to figure out what those externalities were and how to fix them. But more and more, I'm actually really excited by the innovators, the outliers of, you know, what I call mission-driven entrepreneurs, the individuals who, whether they're building a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, who are saying, you know what, I'm going to pick up a hammer and I'm going to drive a wall through the nail on this issue. And it's tangible to me. And, you know, I guess, you know, when we get into the Q&A, we'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty on that. But one of the things that I really enjoy about being in Asia, and, you know, before when I could travel on airplanes around Asia to see and to meet with all these entrepreneurs was, you know, the issues are very tangible here. And I know that they are in many other parts of the world. Like, we weren't trying to save a polar bear that was too far from us. It was very much, we have air pollution, we have food safety, cost of education, quality of healthcare, affordable housing. Like, these are real issues for real people. And the governments in Asia, you know, they were focused on solving those problems, you know, sometimes setting great vision and stumbling across, you know, the goals a little bit. But over time, what we're starting to see is where the stakeholders are coming together. They're acknowledging the challenges they face, and they're trying to find ways to work together, whether it's pre-COVID, current COVID, or the next 5 years of COVID. People are just trying to solve real problems. And so that's been a lot of fun to see that, and to be not just witness, but also participate. As you mentioned, I've got a consulting firm, Collective Responsibility. I have a charity, Hands On. I work in academics, and I'm also the chair of the American Chamber of Commerce's Sustainability Committee as well. So I love being part of the community. I love working with so many amazing people, you know, foreign, local, bouncing back and forth in between. And that's kind of where, I don't know, that's what gets me up in the morning, and that's kind of what I spend my whole day on. So, you know, from there, I'm open to any questions you may have or insights. I'd love to hear more about the work that you guys have been doing and how you're trying to inspire and equip people as well, because that's what communities do. They work together for common goals. So,
Richard, thank you so much for your comments. So you mentioned you love being involved, hands-on, and I like very much what you have said about people are trying to solve real problems in their daily life. And that is where, at the personal level and at the community level, social entrepreneurship and innovation, how do we solve these problems? How do we bring technology to them? How do we bring different societal efforts to solve them in a real way is so relevant and so tangible. Now, in your travels and in being part of the community, you have interviewed many social entrepreneurs. from all of those conversations, I met hundreds, if not thousands of them, could you share the major challenges that social entrepreneurs have? What are the common challenges that you find that are recurring in those conversations with social entrepreneurs?
So I've formally interviewed for my YouTube channel 100. And if you Google my name, you'll find them from there. And it's all over Asia. And just to give you a bit of background, the reason why I started this channel was because there was a community of social entrepreneurs that I knew, but when I looked at social entrepreneurs globally, the only ones being highlighted were those from Western countries, sometimes African, sometimes some Latin American examples, but by and large, Asia was not represented. So I was like, no, this is my opportunity because these are my friends. These are people I respect. The common challenges. Okay, so let's set aside the issue that they're focused on because it could be food, water, climate change. The issues are, we're kind of agnostic in the business of social entrepreneurship. And also set aside the legal basis of nonprofit versus profit because every country is a little bit different. Some offer nonprofit status, some don't. But at the end of the day, I think every entrepreneur is building a business. What they do with their profit, how they take their money in is a little bit different. But fundamentally, there's three things that I've found that you have to get right. I call it the Holy Trinity. First off, you have to have a product. You have to, and in that you have to solve a problem. The problem cannot be intangible. It can't be something you have to sell too much of. It has to have a very clear pain point to the community, to the group, to the economy that you're selling to. And I would say what's interesting is how we share many of the same challenges, but at the local level, how they have their uniqueness. They're very nuanced. And so the best social entrepreneurs I've seen, they understand the local condition, and then they try over time to build out from there. They're not coming in with one platform that they read about or they saw on the internet or they heard about from somewhere else. They're really crafting it locally. And that product it's meant for that market. And so if they do that right, that's kind of stage one. And I talk a lot through our podcasts and things about how do you go up from there? Well, first off, you have to make the decision to jump and that you have confidence in your idea and you have to pilot that idea. From a pilot, you have to build upon that idea. So all that is part of the product process.
Mhm.
The second part is you need to have the team. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are amazing when it comes to having the idea that's crazy. Then they have to figure out how do they create a team that's just as crazy as they are, as the first core, the first two, the first three, the first 20 people that will expand on that mission, who really have drunk the Kool-Aid and are running full blast without necessarily many resources, much structure, without much clarity of how to move forward. They believe in it so much they're willing to throw everything into it. After you reached, I found about the first stage of stability, which could be between 15 and 30 staff for a lot of the companies I looked at that point, they become organizations where people have jobs. These aren't the first founders. These aren't the first people that drank the Kool-Aid. These people are coming in, they're career minded. They're very siloed. They're specialists and, in project management or in water technologies. And this is where your organization professionalizes. Well, that's your first shift in culture. Now, actually, I have to say, this is where I've failed big time twice, is making that transition. Well, the best entrepreneurs I know are the ones who make that transition because they've either planned for it or they've been through the pain of a failure or whatever it may be, and they can make that jump 15 to 30 people to 100 plus. Then the last one, which everyone will say is the first one, is money. You have to have the funding to grow or to stabilize your organization. And what I find is, through my own experience building multiple organizations, early on, if you have a great product, a great idea, and you have a passionate team, you can get the money because people are inspired by ideas and they're inspired by the potential that you and your great team can bring. But once you get too far, you go from pilot to program or pilot to process, it's a whole different funding stream. It's a whole different way of selling your organization or your product. And that's another point where a lot of entrepreneurs fail because either the team or they don't quite execute on it well enough. And so that's where the scale of money comes in, because you can bootstrap only so long if you want to have a real impact. And then obviously when you get to 100 plus 500, I have some friends who went from 50 to 600-700 in the course of 18 months, 2 years. I mean, just to see that phenomenal growth, you have to, the fourth thing, really be, you have to have a high pain tolerance and a conviction in yourself, in your ideas, and the people that you're surrounded by. And I think if any of those things wobble, that's where you see an organization stall, a great idea kind of fall off, an entrepreneur go into micromanagement. Like that's where things, the wheels start to wobble a little bit as it goes down the highway.
So money follows the vision is what you're telling us. And you need a superb team to execute on the vision, or the wheels begin to fall off.
Absolutely. And I think so. I think, if you're a large organization, the money is not going to follow the vision like it does if you're a startup and a pilot program. Because what do you have when you're that early? You have your story personally, and you have your vision for how the world is wrong, and you're going to fix it, in whatever context that may be. And so your early funders or your early donors, if you're a nonprofit, they're going to believe in your story as the entrepreneur, how you sell it. But that won't last forever, or it shouldn't last forever, I don't think. At some point, the organization needs to show impact, and it needs to show return on investment, and needs to show the ability to scale and sustain itself. And as you do that, you're proving value to your stakeholders. And through that value will then come longer term sources of money, whether it be product-oriented product sales, service sales, foundation grants, government contracts. I think is a very large area where I see entrepreneurs getting very interested lately. But early on, yes, it's a lot of story, and then the funding comes, not the other way around.
Thank you for mentioning that, Richard, because it is often conceived as if you don't have the funding in the beginning, you can't put it together. And what you're saying here is really interesting in terms of building up an organization. It's almost also like, of course, entrepreneurship in the world of business. You've got to sell the story. You have to enamor people in the beginning, and then everything begins to step in. You mentioned government purchases, and there's a tremendous amount I find that governments can do to inspire change by using the power of government purchases. Have you seen some of those experiences in the conversations that you've had and the places you've visited?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Singapore and what they're doing with vertical farms. They're really helping entrepreneurs there, because for Singapore, agriculture and the importation of food it's a pain point for them. So they want to solve that. And they're working with social or mission-driven entrepreneurs to solve that problem. In China, we have that a lot. In Japan, they have that through different services for different areas. Like every government's a little bit different, and some are really dependent upon their own budgets. As I mean, you're probably the expert in this, more than I am, because that was your that's how you have to allocate, right? And I think more and more, as an American looking back at my own country right now, I think this is a huge opportunity where you're not government picking winners, you're government providing framework and funding that allow innovation and entrepreneurship to grow. And then hopefully through that, you're finding efficiency as your own organization, and that's symbiotic. And I just find that right now, because we're solving really clear problems that government, business, nonprofit communities agree on, it's easier to do that here right now than it is to do that in a country where the problem isn't tangible, where it's not in the backyard of everyone right now.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Very insightful. Elena T., let me turn it over to you, please, for questions.
Okay, I have a question, Richard. If assisting an organization in building up a team from scratch, what qualities are you looking for?
Ooh, I've given a lot of thought to this, because I've hired young and inexperienced, and I've hired older and super experienced and everything in between. And I think every organization requires its own mix. personally, I think when you're getting started, your number two, if you're a solo founder, it's different than if you're a group of founders. So let me qualify that. And I've always been a solo founder. So if I'm a solo founder, my first hire needs to be a strong number two. They need to be experienced 3 to 5 years and passionate about the issue that I am setting forth as the mission for the organization. They need to wholeheartedly believe me and trust me in my craziness. And then they're able to also, they're good at bringing in other people who can balance that a little bit, right? Like, so it could be younger, it could be middle experience. They can bring in partnerships. Like, their jobs to actually build that first group of people who will grow over time. And I would say for the most part, I found that in the early startup, young, passionate people are probably the best starting point. But at some point, for every organization, you have to have real experienced professionals come in and to balance that, because you need structure. But I will say every organization is different, and it's very hard to get it right as a solo entrepreneur, because there's just a lot to get done. If you are coming in as a core team of founders, I think the best thing is if you have someone that's really good with product, someone's really good with vision, and someone's really good with the organizational management. And that can be everything from finance to HR. Like, if you can cover those three things as a starting point, your need to build team is going to be very different. You can hire more mid-level experience because you are the passionate group, that because you want to surround yourself with a lot of passion, and that core founding group could be what you need versus the young team who's just running at you. So every organization is different. But from the starting point, I, as a solo entrepreneur, always found like the young, passionate, we're going to change the world mentality trumps the I've worked 30 years in this industry and I'm not sure your idea is a good one.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
But
Even if they're right. Even if they're right.
I also have a follow-up. Since lots of different people on different levels, how do you really get the team on the same page?
Well, I guess, do you want everyone on the same page would be my first question. Like, do you want to have people who will look at the same idea from different angles and have different questions? Or do you want a team that rubber stamps everything the founder does? I've had both. And I would argue, actually, I just reformed my entire board for my charity because I had a board that just did everything that I thought was right. Like, there wasn't a lot of questions. But now the idea is like, no, let's all put all of our effort on the table to make better product, to have higher impact. And if we do that, it's okay to disagree respectfully, right? And so you don't want everyone on the same page. You don't want 8 cookie cutter people. You want people who are empowered. You want people who voice their opinion. You want people who will do the work as well. And so, you don't want a bunch of people they're not on the same page and they kind of throw eggs at each other's head, but they won't do the work either. Like, it's very difficult to find that balance, but when you do, that's the sweet spot.
Great.
Great
Now,
answer. Also a great question. Thank you.
Great answer, by the way. Do you want people on the team that all think alike, or do you want people that are always kind of pushing the limit?
So I would answer that and just say, when I was younger, I didn't want as many people pushing me back. Now that I'm a little bit more experienced, I value that a lot more now. And that comes with the experience of being an entrepreneur and having gone up and gone down. And that's just kind of my perspective on it. But it's tough. It's really tough.
Very interesting. T?
see, you mentioned that the organization can be at a very beginning stage, and then they can be more mature stage, need more professions in there. Even they're not pulling at the same direction, but if they create impact, that actually makes sense for that stage. But I mean, when you're seeing a lot of organization, how do people actually, apart from they, put their heads down to work on their own task, how they, figure out what is kind of the success for their organization? How do they benchmark or measure or you measure them taking the successful path?
In
Great.
other
I
words,
mean, that's
how
a
do,
great question.
yeah, how do they measure success?
That's a great question. And I think I've talked a lot about this, and I think that, it depends, again, everything depends upon the stage of the organization. If we're talking about startup, like I'll talk about my charity. When I was starting my charity, it was something very new to China, which was we manage volunteers, but episodically, which means you're not signing up for a 6-month commitment to the same organization. You're going when you have time and for issues that you find interesting to you. Well, a lot of our partners didn't really trust that model. They wanted to see the same person over and over. They wanted to see training. And so for us, the early projects were, did the volunteers have fun? Did the beneficiaries have smiles on their face? Did our partners ask us back? Just very simple. We didn't overcomplicate it. Now, 3 years, 10 years, now 17 years into it, we look at it very different. What's the return rate of our volunteers? What's the average? Like you start to look at different ways. And so what I found was in the way that I kind of explain this to people is, imagine you're walking out of a movie theater. You can see about that much light as a starting point. And that's what you should start with. It's like the really easy things to measure. Is someone smiling in front of you when you're doing something? Are you having a small impact in a way that's very predictable? Great. Now, over time, expand that field of vision. Start to measure the immeasurable. And at the same time, don't try and overcomplicate or over-engineer. Don't force it too much. Because what I find then is people can make really bad decisions based on having too much data. So learning to measure the right thing is also very important. And I think for me, it's always come down to the stakeholders, to really looking at how would I measure the output, whether it's see, hear, or feel. Using a theory of change model, like this is my action, this is what I expect the outputs to be, this is what I'm seeing, is this what I want? And then backing it up. For some organizations, it's getting really technical and, are we saving carbon? Are we saving water? Are we improving educational outputs? And so you might need some technical.
Did we lose Richard in the conversation?
I think it's rejoining connection.
Friends, hold on a minute. We'll be back with Richard in a minute. We sometimes have.
I'm back.
You're back. Great.
I'm back. Sorry. So I'm not sure how far I got, but basically, you shouldn't overcomplicate the process. Like start with what you can see, hear, and feel, and over time, deepen those layers, widen the field of vision, and basically with the idea that every piece of data should help you make a better decision or help those who are funding you or feeling impact see the results of the work so that they have confidence in you.
Mhm.
That's good. Wow.
Richard,
great. Thank you.
Richard, when you talked about the three things, the three fundamentals that you talked about, one of the elements that you mentioned is that there's kind of like a stepping stone between the 25 to 30 person organization and then jumping from there to say 100 or more.
Right.
So a lot of what we do in the world today needs to have a lot more impact, and therefore the scalability of projects that social entrepreneurs are pursuing is very important. Could you please elaborate on the challenges of going from the 25 to 30 to the 100 and more person organization? What are the challenges of scale?
So internally, I think the biggest challenge is the culture of the organization and making sure that you have the right teams in the right place, running in the right direction. I found that a lot of times entrepreneurs plan for today or plan for what should have happened last week, when what they should be doing is thinking, what is this organization going to look like in 3 months, 9 months, 4 years from now? And how can I structure myself for that? How can I structure the organization for that? Similarly, when it comes to say product launches or product scale, It's almost impossible now to scale around the world as we did 2 years ago. You can't open up offices. You can't fly very freely. Supply chains are disrupted. So you have to come up with entirely new models. Well, for my consulting agency, that means instead of trying to open up offices in 8 cities in Asia, I need to develop 3 partnerships with very similar organizations where we collaborate, and then maybe over time we become a single brand. For my charity, we have 1 big office in Shanghai. We have 15 sites that we work with on a regular basis. But if I want to really scale to China, maybe it's developing a training program that's online now. Maybe it's developing a software that other organizations can leverage. I need to think about scale very differently. At the same time, the opportunities for scale, I would argue, have never been better, because the realities are the impacts of climate change, the impact of affordable housing, the impact of all these externalities that we are worried about, they're growing in size, scale, and speed. I used to be focused only on Asia because of 2 billion more people coming into the cities. But the challenges that the African continent, that Latin America, that South America, and then the North America is all facing now very similar challenges around economic development and poverty and educating the future of our children. Like, there's so much opportunity. Now it's about how do you execute smart. And so to that point, I'd say if you have the right product and you're able to find your model, funding would then probably be the next issue, or the systems of delivery and the grease that you apply to it. Because if you're a physical product and only manufacturing in China, you got to kind of look at how you balance that. But at the same time, you got to figure out how are you going to finance the organization's growth differently, because you're not opening up 10 offices. You're not opening up all these things on your own. And so again, it's just looking at each part of that product, the system of delivery, finance, and the people. How are things going to scale? If you look at today and you say, we're going to be 10x in a year, most groups don't do that early on, and they don't do it well enough. But if you spend the time to do that, it puts you in a much better position to understand how you should grow. But also, if you face challenges, what are those signs that you should see, so that you can tweak the model to make sure you don't go down down in that part of the I guess that cycle.
Mm-hmm. Richard, thank you for that. One has the impression that as global challenges, externalities, as you have well mentioned them, continue to grow, so has the field of social entrepreneurship. Do you find that there is more capital in the world that is available today for social entrepreneurship, or are more social entrepreneurs having to fight it out for more or less the same amount of resources available?
I'd say there's always different levels of churn happening, but so 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of money for, like, say, a Series C, a Series D, mezzanine going to IPO. There was nothing in the VC category. Now there's a lot there. Angels investors, I think they've always been there, and that relies a lot upon the story of the entrepreneur, their network, the friends, families, and fools. I think that's always been there, and that will only continue to be there because individuals, they understand now at a much higher level, and on a personal level, the cost of inaction. The other thing is, on a personal, like friend, family, and fools, you have crowdsourced funding online now that has opened up a whole new field of fundraising that we didn't have 10 years ago. So there's definitely more money early stage. Mid stage, I think, is probably still the hardest part for most mission-driven entrepreneurs, particularly for the for-profit. I think for the nonprofit, it's a little bit easier because you can go to large foundations, get large grants more readily after you've proven your model than before you've proven your model. But for the private organizations who are for-profit, they struggle to get that $10 million to $50 million investment, or maybe $5 to $15 million investment, because they're still selling a bit of the good story. We're a social entrepreneur, and to a lot of funders, a lot of investors, when they hear that, they're like, "Ooh, less return on what should be a high growth investment phase.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that's faced is that a lot of the impact entrepreneurs, honestly, they're just bankers trying to look better. They're not, the funding is not coming from people who are passionate from the causes, who've made a lot of money, who are reinvesting in the causes. It's coming from the bankers and the banking sector saying, we'll allocate 10% of our portfolio, 1% of our portfolio towards sustainability, towards ESG. And that's, that money is, it's not the pure money that you want for this, that really understand the vision of and the potential of the organization. Now, I should say that there's some hybrids there, like agricultural drones and water technologies and housing technologies that increase efficiency, that allow for affordability. Those models, if they don't talk too much about how they're good and trying to save the world, they're immediately fundable right now, right? Plant-based proteins, immediately fundable. But early on, it was, we're trying to save the world because we're a bunch of crazy vegans. But
yep.
you have comparables now. So it's easier, but I'd still say, depending upon where you are and the economic, like right now is a bad time to be raising money because the stock markets are off 30%, but it's better than it was 10 years ago. And so that's progress. But is it where it should be? I think we have another 10 years to go.
Well, thank you. Richard, we're coming up to about the close of our time here. But on behalf of GLAZE, the Global Alliance of Sharing Economy, Elena T, Godfrey, and myself would like to thank you ever so much for your enlightening and highly spirited conversation on social entrepreneurship and innovation in Asia and lessons in going to scale. We look forward to your progress and learning more about what collective responsibility continues to do in Asia. And hopefully our paths will intersect soon enough. So thank you ever so much. And thank you, friends, for having joined us on this last conversation of this year. We look forward to catching up with you in 2022 and continuing our Sharing Global Views conversations. Thank you so much and have a great end of the year. Many blessings.
Thank you very much.